In this video, I'm going to walk you through a live demo of using the Testimonial Gatherer, which is a GPT that will be super helpful to anyone in a marketing, sales, or any go-to-market role. You'll be familiar with the scenario. Salespeople calling out, why haven't we got more references and case studies? Marketing saying, well, if you give us customers to speak to, we can create those case studies. But salespeople so busy on their own pipeline and selling to new customers that the cycle goes on and on. So what this GPT attempts to solve is making it very easy for those existing clients to provide their story and the journey they've been on and lessons learned that they would pass back to their earlier selves. Now, the scenario is that the salesperson or marketer would share this GPT with the client. They would access this in their own ChatGPT instance. Maybe they're chatting in a car or while they're in a meeting room, and they're able to capture that through a kind of interview style. Now, it would be a bit weird for me to provide a reference for our own business. So instead, I'm going to turn the interview to being a bit more around providing a testimonial for one of our suppliers, a company called Legal Vision that provides all of our outsourced contracting and legal support. So yes, you can type into ChatGPT, but it is way better if you can talk. And so that is what we're going to do. So here is the voice mode. Hey, ChatGPT, I would like to provide a customer testimonial, but instead of walking us through the Kowalah testimonial, I work for Kowalah, and I'd like to provide a testimonial for one of our suppliers, which is a company called Legal Vision, who provide our outsourced legal and contracting support.
Absolutely. We can do that. We'll just flip our approach a bit. Instead of talking about Koala's service, we'll put Legal Vision at the heart of the story and capture how they helped you out. So let's dive in. You can definitely use voice if that's easier, or just type. Totally up to you to start off. Could you share the situation or challenge your team was facing before you began working with Legal Vision? What was the most pressing need at that time?
Yeah, so this goes back to probably about 2 years ago, and we're a small startup. We were getting going in both consulting, but also providing a managed service, and we needed contracts. So we needed a consulting contract, and we also needed a product contract. And I didn't have any lawyers, so I arranged meetings with 2 or 3 local lawyers that said they work with companies. And they didn't understand the world that we worked in, but more so, the way that they were going to charge was kind of fixed fee. We're going to charge you 3, 4, 5 grand for a contract, and I had no idea whether that was going to be the contract that we needed, or whether we're going to need changes to it. And so I did a bit more search, and that's how I came across them.
That's a perfect start. Thank you. So it sounds like you were in that classic early stage moment where you needed solid contracts for both your consulting and your managed service, but you didn't have in house legal support. And those initial local lawyers just didn't quite fit the bill. They didn't understand your field, and their pricing model felt too rigid for what you actually needed. All right, let's build from there. The next piece is about how you structured things on your end once you started working with Legal Vision. For example, who on your team was involved in the process, and how did you go about working with Legal Vision to get those contracts right?
So it was just me working on it on our side. And the way that it worked with Legal Vision is that we had, I think, a client service manager or an account manager. But what I liked about it was that they have a platform, a front end that basically, depending on what you need, whether it's support with a trademark, whether it's support with an employment contract, whether it's support with a customer contract, you just raise a request through the platform, and then you get directed to the right person. And that may not be someone that you've worked with before, but they're a specialist on that specific contract type. So that's where we kicked off, mainly with our overall terms and conditions. And then I worked with another team on things like privacy policy and DPA.
That's really insightful, and it gives us a great picture of how Legal Vision made it easier for you as essentially a one person show on the legal side. So you had this account manager to start with, and then you can just raise a request through their platform. I love how you highlighted that you got directed to the right specialist for each contract type, whether that was terms and conditions, privacy policies, or whatever else you needed. Now let's move on to a couple of the decisions you made along the way. For instance, were there any big choices around budgeting or priorities that you had to think through when you decided to go with Legal Vision instead of a traditional law firm?
Yeah, I mean it's a commitment. So if I say the traditional model might be pay 5K for a contract, and you're not sure if that's going to be the contract or the only one that you need, versus a monthly commitment that lasts over 3 or 5 years, depending on your contract with Legal Vision. So as a small startup, it was quite a commitment, but because of the way the model works, it's like the more you use it, the more value you get. And so that was a big decision. But as we've gone through the relationship, then the ability for us to quickly spin up things like trademarks, like subcontractor agreements, like employment contracts has meant that this model is definitely working for us, and we're getting great value from it.
That's a great distinction, and it really shows the trade-off you had to consider. So instead of that one-off big spend with a traditional lawyer, like you said, 5 grand for a single contract you might not even be sure about, you opted for a longer-term monthly commitment. And that choice actually gave you more flexibility because the more you used it, the more value you got. I love that example. All right, we're building a really nice picture here. Let's talk a little bit about outcomes and lessons. Could you share maybe one tangible outcome or metric that improved after you started working with Legal Vision? Even an approximate number is fine, like how much time or cost you saved. And then we'll wrap up with any advice you'd give to peers considering a similar shift.
Yeah, I mean, without sharing actual kind of revenue numbers, I think some specifics I would talk about is the time to contract, as in what was the time from when I had a request to when I had a agreement that I could get signed by a client, a subcontractor, or employee. And I would say on average, that is looking like 7 days. So I register the request on the platform. I typically have a call with that nominated person within 36 hours. And then I'm getting the first iteration of that agreement through within the week. So that has helped me with negotiating client contracts as well as bringing on subcontractors.
That's a really clear and concrete outcome, and it's perfect for others to understand. So essentially, you've gone from that uncertainty and delays of traditional legal routes to having a pretty reliable 7 day turnaround from request to a signable agreement, which is fantastic. That's a really nice metric we can highlight. All right, to wrap this up, let's talk about any advice you'd share with peers. If another CEO or founder was thinking about outsourcing legal work in a similar way, what's one lesson you've learned or one thing you do differently now that you've been through this journey with Legal Vision?
I think a couple of things. One, location doesn't really matter. Whilst I'm based in the south of the UK, Legal Vision are mainly in Manchester, and a lot of wonderful Australians that I've met because they're originally an Australian company. So location is not so much of an issue. The lesson for me is that what I really want out of any kind of legal query is I need the contract, I need the answer, and it's about speed to getting that contract that is important. And so I would focus less on maybe a traditional firm that sat down the road and has got 1 or 2 people that are nominated to your account. And it's more about have I got access to those specialisms within a very short period of time.
That's a great piece of advice and a perfect note to end on. So, your big takeaway is that location really doesn't matter as much as you might think. And what truly counts is that speed and access to specialized legal expertise when you need it. So, instead of focusing on a traditional firm down the road, it's really about having a platform that can get you to the right specialist quickly. All right, we've got plenty of great material here. I'll go ahead and put together those short quotes, a polished paragraph, and a 1 pager summarizing your journey with Legal Vision. If you'd like, you can share any visuals like a company logo or your profile photo and I'll add those in as well. Just let me know.
Cool. So that was the interview process. I'm now going to stop that, and I'm now just going to in text here. Can you create the PDF testimonial document? And what this is going to do is capture all of the information from our conversation and pull it into a series of sound bites and a 1 paragraph overview. It's giving me that as a download, but as I'm just sharing a tab, I'm going to say, great, can you also create it in your canvas so I can see it on the screen here? And if I had uploaded, logos and things, so here's our testimonial. We went from waiting weeks to reliable 7-day turnaround. Subscription model meant we used it. The more we used it, the more value we got. Here's a concise testimonial, like 1 paragraph, and then the full journey and lessons learned. And we can obviously customize the template depending on what we actually want from our testimonials. So there we go. One example of how we can really use custom GPTs to solve real world business problems that are, the challenges that your teams are facing day in and day out.